Coming up on this episode of Together for Good, Jesus says that we will be given a peace that passes all understanding. And when our life of faith is really grounded and secure, I think we know that to be true. But what happens? How do you protect this sense of peace that Jesus offers in our busy go, go, go world? I've got some thoughts about that. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good. How do we protect our peace? What's the spiritual sunscreen, so to speak? And here's what's interesting. It's not going to be what you think. You might be listening to this expecting me to give you a clear multi-point plan and how to defend against the advances of the devil and all his empty promises. That's not what I have for you. And yet it is in its own roundabout way. But I think that's part of the problem is that we have to think about this differently than we think about problems in the rest of our life. But let's start at the beginning. First, I do believe that our life of faith is meant to give us a sense of peace. And so that can be just a starting point too. Do you feel peaceful when you're thinking about your life of faith? Is your life of faith and your spiritual practices and your faith community, are they filling you with a sense of peace that surpasses all human understanding? Obviously, church can be about so much more than just a feeling of peace. And in the same sense, if your church community is just creating with you feelings of guilt and shame or anxiety and worry, that needs to be explored. That's not what faith should be about. And working at a church, this is always a hard part. I love where I work and the people that I get to work with. And at the same time, it's a job some days. I readily admit that. And just like your job, my job doesn't always fill me with a sense of peace. And if that was continually becoming the theme, that would be something I'd really take a step back and think about and wonder about. The good news is, though, that my life of work, while it does include those real moments of life, is also just a place of such incredible peace. I feel such peace in knowing that I'm doing something that seems to positively affect the lives of other people, and where I feel like I'm a part of a much more meaningful endeavor as a community as we try to do good for the world and for the lives of the people who keep coming through our doors, right? All of this, in its own way, gives me that grounding and that sense of peace. In addition to beautiful music and worship services that, yes, I get to lead, but I also just get to participate in on a weekly basis. If I was out there looking for a church, that's what I'd be looking for. Like when I walk in here, do I feel a sense of peace? And that can be from the architecture to the movements of the worship service to the ways that the community interacts. And that's just for me. This is part of what gives me peace. You have to answer that question for yourself. But more to the point of this episode, the spiritual sunscreen, how do we protect against the fact that the world is constantly trying to pull us away from this sense of peace? And think about how this happens. We are in a society that really expects us to work a lot and to accomplish more and more and more. You are often measured by what you produce, even in my industry, so to speak, right? If I was not ever contributing something to the life of the congregation, people might start asking questions like, hey, when is Pastor Nate going to do anything? That's what it means to be in a capitalist society. This is just how things work, is that we are often evaluated by what we produce. And I don't think there's any getting away from that, at least not in the near future. And so this is the reality. And yet our life of faith specifically gives us instructions, practices, ideas, theology that speaks to something very different than how the world tends to operate. Another piece to just the structures of society, we also have to mention it's not only that we are valued by what we produce and what we create, but additionally, we're in this world that's obsessed with the buying and selling and the exchange of products and goods. Advertising is prevalent and it's everywhere. And someone is always trying to sell you something. They estimate that the average human being is exposed to about 3,000 advertisements a week. And this is right, billboards, ads on buses that drive by, social media ads, of course, television commercials. That's an exhausting place to be because it's now, yes, you're measured by what you produce, but also you're only seen by these companies as what you can provide them. And so it's all this exchanging of goods and services that underlies all of existence too in 2025. And it makes you very suspicious, doesn't it? This is why people are so skeptical of not only the church, but pretty much anything. Like, what are you trying to sell me? Is this a scam? You get these text messages and phone calls, and I never know. It's always so hard to tell, did I actually sign up for this? Or is this a scam and they're trying to get me to do something else? My wife almost got scammed the other day. She was just trying to sell something herself on Facebook Marketplace. And then it resulted in this whole scam setup where the person's, oh, I tried to Venmo you, but it didn't work. So you need to Venmo me and then you'll get a business account and then it'll be okay. And I'll return all the money. I was like, okay, we're on to you here, scammer. Anyways, but yeah, this is the world we live in where like people are always trying to trick you into buying something, into buying their product. And maybe not even necessarily trick you, but to convince you that you need this product in order to feel more whole and complete and happy. And so it must be obvious, hopefully, in my setup of all of this, why it is so hard to continue in a sense of peace, to allow our life of faith and to allow what God has to say about us to continually rest on our hearts and minds. It's so hard because we're likely not hearing that message much during the rest of the week. Maybe you get a sense of that on a Sunday morning. Hopefully you do, but maybe not even. And then you head out into the week and you're being told that you need to work overtime and create more widgets. And on the way to work, you're being bombarded by advertisements of people who don't really care about you as a human being, but just about the ways that you can add to their company's bottom line. It's an exhausting world to live in. So how do we protect our peace? What is the spiritual sunscreen that will protect us from this onslaught? It's not what you're thinking. It's not a 10-step program to get more spiritually fit. It is rather a reorganizing of our mindset and the new understanding of who we are and our identity. And this is very biblical. I want us to go back in our mindset to one of the very first sacred stories in the scripture, the story of the Exodus. This is about the Israelites, God's chosen people who have become slaves in Egypt. And they've been enslaved for 400 years in Egypt. And eventually Moses comes along and he's called by God. And with the help of Aaron and Miriam, they lead the Israelites out of Egypt and to freedom in the promised land. There's a little wandering in the wilderness there first, but that's actually an important piece of the puzzle. The wandering in the wilderness that takes place is part of God's plan to help change the mindset of these Israelite people. They need to be reprogrammed, for lack of a better term. They need to have a new mindset instilled within them in order to fully embrace their identity as God's people and to fully understand what that identity means for them. Because when they were in Egypt, they were just the Hebrew slaves. And their job was to work, was to produce 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They were fed, at least during this time. We know this through other scripture stories, but they were only fed because the Egyptians knew that they needed to have their strength in order to keep building the pyramids or whatever it was that they were building. And so when they are freed from slavery in Egypt, there are many scenes while the Israelites wander in the wilderness where they say to God, "We wish you hadn't freed us. We wish we were back in Israel where we could still eat by the flesh pots," it says. "We wish that you had never freed us from slavery," which is such a mind-boggling thing for them to say. But it shows how their mindset hasn't changed and that they don't know how to fully understand themselves in this new place, and they're still stuck on the rhythms and the old ways of life in Egypt. Along the way on this journey, one of the things that God does is God gives the Israelites the 10 commandments. Moses goes up on the mountain, Moses gets the tablets, comes down like, "Hey, here are the 10 commandments." And just an aside about this, okay? The 10 commandments have a preamble. Did you know that? Just like our Constitution has a preamble, the 10 commandments have a preamble. And the preamble is really important. It frames the whole thing. And God says, "I am the Lord your God who led you out of slavery in Egypt. Therefore, you shall have no other gods before me." The preamble sets the context. And what's funny is that when we always talk about putting the 10 commandments up in courtrooms and in classrooms throughout the country, they never include the preamble because the preamble would make it weird to put up in a classroom or a courtroom. I'm just saying that this might seem irrelevant, but this is my soapbox. I just think that's an important piece of the puzzle. If we're going to be putting these up, it needs to have the context. "I am the Lord your God who led you out of slavery in Egypt. Therefore you will." That's why God is giving the commandments. God is trying to instruct these Israelites how to be God's people again. He's trying to give them a new identity. You are the people who will do this. I have done this for you. This is how you shall live under this new identity, under this new reality that I am ushering you into. The third commandment that God provides says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy." And then God actually spells out a little more detail of what that all means in the scriptures. But more to the point, this is one of the most clear places where God is trying to instill within the chosen people a new understanding. In Egypt, as I've said, they worked 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They never had time or the ability to rest. That wasn't how their life was programmed for them. God is trying to help them remember something different. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, because now you're breaking this old Egyptian system. Not only that, but in the breaking of the old Egyptian system, you're remembering what God has done for you. You're remembering the preamble to these 10 commandments. We're not in Egypt anymore, and so I don't have to work 7 days a week. We're not in Egypt anymore, so I'm no longer a slave. I'm a free person, and my God has told me to take a day to rest. We think about the 10 commandments as just, these are God's instructions, we must do them, but they're actually these incredible gifts that God is giving to us in order to help us live into a new understanding, into a new reality, into a new identity. We don't have to be slaves to our jobs. We don't have to be measured just by what we produce. We believe in a God who loves us as we are and who invites us to live beyond the mechanisms of this society where our worth is completely measured by what we create or by what we purchase. And so this is how we protect our peace, is by resting, is by doing nothing, is by doing the opposite of what society demands of us. Not buying, not selling, not producing endlessly, but just slowing down, doing nothing. And notice how exactly what I'm articulating also has a very clear theological bent to it. One of the things that the Christian church emphasizes, especially the one that I'm a part of, Go Lutherans, Martin Luther was really big on the idea of grace, not works. And this sense is that it is about what God does for us, not what we can do or produce for God. It's the way I like to describe it is using math. And some of you have definitely heard me say this before. But in math, you learn the order of operations. And so you learn that please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication, then division, then subtraction, then addition. I think I did that relatively the correct order. Some of those can flip, but you have to do it in that order or you'll get the wrong answer. If you get a math problem that says 2 plus 1 times 3, if you just read that left to right, 2 plus 1 is 3 times 3 is 9, you might think. Oh, but if you do it in the correct order, you have to do multiplication first. So 2 plus 1 times 3, you have to do the 1 times 3 first, which is 3, plus 2 is 5. See how we ended up in two very different places there. You have to do it in the right order. That's all I'm trying to say. And within Christian theology, the idea is that we are saved by grace through faith, and this is not the result of works so that no one may boast. And what that means is that God acts first. Grace comes to us first. It is about God's saving action in Egypt first. And then we get to respond to this grace with good works of our own. It's not a sense of just giving all of us a free pass, like everyone's saved, do whatever you want. Little irony there. No, it's about the fact that God has done something for us first, and then we are so moved by this love and grace shown to us that we can't help but respond with good works of our own. That's the story of Exodus. God frees the Israelites first, and then they respond by living out the 10 commandments. But it even is within there. God says and programs within all of this, as we've been talking about, you need to rest. You aren't in Egypt anymore, where your work was all that mattered. Notice if you do this in the wrong order, you end up back in Egypt. I need to work really hard. I need to do exactly what's right. I need to make sure that I'm living out my faith exactly and to the letter of the law so that God will love me. That's just ending up back in Egypt, where you're completely measured by what you produce, by what you create. It is the message of our world as well. You are only as good as the next great thing that you do. Keep working, keep producing. The world demands it of you. God flips the script entirely and says, no, it's about my love for you first. I call you beloved. I forgive you for your mistakes, not because you deserve it, but because I love you inherently for who you are. You have value regardless of if you ever produce again. And so this is how we protect our peace. There's such peace in knowing this abundant, generous, gracious love of God, and we protect it by doing nothing. We protect it by allowing ourselves the grace of not always getting it right, of not working endlessly, giving yourself the grace of sitting in the hammock for 30 minutes just because it's a nice day and you're just going to enjoy it. Notice how this is a completely different mindset. In the same sense, too, what's amazing about this grace that God offers us is that when we really allow it to rest upon ourselves, it's not going to just make us lazy. That's what people always worry about. Oh, it sounds like you're just telling everyone to do whatever they want and give up. No. When we really come to understand how deeply our God loves us and that we don't have to earn anything, it changes your heart in such a way that you can't help but want to respond. Again, the order of operations, the grace comes first, and then you can't help but reach out with good works of your own. Not because you think you need them, not because you need to prove to God that you're good enough, but because you have to respond with gratitude. And the only way you can think to respond is by sharing the message with someone else, is by sharing that level of compassion and grace and love with another person who you know needs it. This is how we protect our peace, friends, by doing nothing, because God has already done all of it for us. I hope that this message can give you a deep sense of peace today. And I hope all the more that deep sense of peace gets into your bones and transforms you into someone who just can't help but share this love and grace that you've been given. As always, thanks for listening to the podcast. As I always like to say, stay in peace, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Together for Good podcast. If you'd like more resources for your walk of faith, please visit our website, bethany-denver.org, or download our mobile app by searching Bethany Connect in your phone's app store.